Welcome back to the Scattered Abroad Network's joint podcast, filmed live at Polishing the Pulpit. If you are tuning in with us and you have never been to PTP, we really hope and pray that you'll make plans to attend this upcoming August. There's also one in July in Branson. There's one in Sevierville in August. That's where we're at right now. There's also one in Branson, Missouri, over there in July. If you are looking for Bible study material, if you're looking for a wonderful opportunity to study books of the Bible, we also want to just tell you that in July 29th through August the 2nd in Murray, Kentucky, there will be a conference that you can attend held and hosted by the members of the Scattered Abroad Network, as well as several faculty members and alumni of the Memphis School of Preaching. We hope and pray that you'll make plans to attend. This season is going to be a wonderful one, a special study on scattered disciples. The study of the apostles or the disciples of Christ and the disciples that we read about in the New Testament is certainly one that is worthy of consideration. And as we are going to embark on a 12-month journey together, I have with me every episode. We will have two guests, and it's my privilege to have those individuals sit down. This is where we are kind of gathered together ourselves and have the opportunity to see each other. We're all scattered around the world throughout the year, and so PTP is the one time we get a chance to sit down and talk and have the opportunity to record all of these. And just so you know, normally you'd see us in different clothes at certain points. Not this year. We're going to film all 12 of these in one day. So if you do see us in different polos, that means that did not work, and we have failed miserably. But we want to take some time to tell you who's on the panel today. I have with me to my left, your right, it doesn't really matter, I guess, but it's Matt McBrayer. And Matt is the preacher at the Whispering Hills Church of Christ in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. And then to my right, your left, again, doesn't matter to you, but it's kind of our thing now. Yeah. Wayne Rogers, who is the director of programming. He's also a stateside missionary with 416 Ministries. If you're looking for a good work to support, 416 would be worthy of consideration. We do want to say before we jump into the podcast ourselves, we are also raising funds for the Gather Together Conference, for Polishing the Pulpit, for our staff, all of the things that we might need. If you're interested in helping us, please reach out to us at san@msop.org, and we'll put all of that information in the show notes, and you'll see an email blurb pop up throughout the episode. All right, guys. Scattered Disciples, Episode 1, Chosen and Commissioned. As we look at this, I want to kind of give an episode theme each month. This is really, if you look at it, why the apostles matter. Mm-hmm. And when you get into the nitty-gritty, which is such a cool phrase to say, the intentional calling of the apostles and their continuing influence is what we're going to be discussing today. And as we look at question number 1, I want to ask, what can we learn from the way Jesus chose his apostles?
Well, I think the first thing that you notice, even prior to choosing them, he spent all night in prayer. And so I think that not only sets the tone, that also kind of helps us to understand how important this decision was, those whom he chose. And so we start there thinking about Jesus, his approach, going to his Father in prayer, talking to him about these individuals that are going to be going out spreading the gospel, those who are going to go out with the keys to the kingdom first, especially, and those who are going to go out with authority. And so I think that's important to just think about. That sets the tone. He spent all night in prayer. Luke chapter 6 gives that, verse 12.
He didn't have to really either, right? I mean, he already knew what was going to happen. So what would really be the purpose of spending all night in prayer, do y'all think?
Well, just going back, he's a servant of the Father even in his ministry. And so, what are you going to do? You go to the Father and go to him in prayer asking for help and showing where the authority really lies. And so, yeah, I think that is an excellent point, the aspect of prayer. And then, of course, for us, when we're making big decisions, we need to be doing the same thing. We need to be going to God in prayer. And I think just in general, just spending a lot of time in prayer. And so, yeah.
Yeah. What else do you have about the idea? We didn't throw it to you yet, really. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so when you think about the way, historically that students would, kind of put in for a teacher, and then the teacher would be like, oh, okay, like they would accept or reject. And that's not what happens here. Jesus goes out and he chooses.
Yeah.
And so it is just amazing how he goes about doing that, just completely, I mean, throughout this, he's called rabbi, from different people. They view him as a rabbi. People view him as a rabbi, and yet he does not act like a rabbi. And, I think there's probably a lot of things that you could, really say right here. I mean, the thing that jumps out of my mind, though, is that these are not the elite because of that.
Yeah.
They have likely, I've gotten a little bit of pushback in the past on this, but if you are a Jew and you're a Jewish boy, what do you want to do? You want to go sit under a rabbi. That's what you want to do. You want to be trained. Well, you had to be accepted to be trained.
Right.
And so these guys are likely people who have been rejected from training.
Yeah.
And then Jesus says, you know what? No, wait, I choose you. I have chosen you. And so it is not the elite that gets this. It's not the best and the brightest, that we would normally think about. It is, the people that have probably already been rejected. And so these are ordinary guys. And, these guys are taken from their works and their apprenticeships.
Right.
And it's just an amazing thing to think about it like that, because, Jesus still chooses today, And so I love that, because, we, us in general, if we were back in the first century, we're Gentiles. And we get chosen too. We get chosen for this new covenant, and there's so much importance to that, I think. But these are not the best and the brightest, the elite. These are not the rich people. These are ordinary people, just like you and me, just doing the Lord's work.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting in Luke 6. Of course, we have that account of him naming the apostles in verse 14 following. But in verse 13, it's interesting, because after he spent all night in prayer, in verse 13 it says, when it was day, he called his disciples to himself. And so he's got a large group of disciples that are with him, following him, and he calls them to himself. And from them, he chose. And so that, to me, that goes a little bit deeper even than that idea. Yes, many of these have been probably rejected from formal training and thinking about that. But here you have, even from this larger group, there's going to be specific ones that are going to be chosen. And so he's called that group. He doesn't call them one by, like he doesn't go out and say, hey, you come over here, I've got a job for you, and calls them to the side. He does this in front of everyone. Yeah. And I think that's important too, to note, okay, from this group who have followed me and who are listening to my teaching and have been here, seen the miracles, at this point, I'm going to choose these 12 men who are going to have, obviously, a specific role in the kingdom and a specific job that's important here. And then that also, I think, helps set the stage for the authority of the apostles, which I know we'll get into as well.
Right, yeah. Maybe I should jump in here and say this for someone who might be confused at what you just said. They're like you said, they're all chosen. But then they might go, well, wait a second, didn't Jesus, talk to Peter on the shoreline? And didn't he go and get Matthew from... Sure. Well, yeah, he did initially. Yeah. And they all are coming together, and they are all... There's a bunch of disciples. Right. There's a bunch of people that are following him, and that is what initially happens. But then he chooses the 12. And so I just thought I
that's a good point,
clarify.
Leadership's always something, that I'm very high on. I want to talk about it. That's where my master's was in, ministerial leadership. The idea of the leadership that Jesus is showing here, where, like we said, he's not obligated to pray all night. If there was ever someone who could have just gone by the hip and shot from the hip and hit every time, it would have been Christ. And yet there's also a reason I think he prayed all night, is for this account to be recorded, so that we would be able to look at that and go, if Jesus prayed all night, how can I just, in a split decision, make, a split-second decision to do something. The second thing that I kind of noticed from this, if we're going to do some text takeaways here, because kind of have to do that, this is very similar in my mind to what the church becomes with the leadership in the church. We look at Acts 2, the apostles end up setting the tone. They continued in the apostles' doctrine. We say today in the church that the elders set the tone. They set a standard of getting the flock fed, of helping it. The apostles were doing that work before the elders were starting to be established in the church. That's how Jesus kind of sets this up. And what does it happen to be when it comes to church organization? From the disciples of the congregation, men are selected, put forth before everybody, and they become elders. And I find it amazing that the men that Jesus the men that he chose to be selected, he didn't just like we talked about, hey, come over here for a minute, let me tell you something. This was done in front of and it wasn't done in a way of saying, well, Matt's better than Wayne and he gets picked. This was a moment, I would think, of celebration of these are the 12. These are Jesus' apostles. These are the people that are going to be following him. And that's how we should view the eldership, too, when the right people are selected. But here's something interesting. Jesus, we know, intentionally picked one of these 12 that was a devil, how the scriptures talk about it, and he picked him for a specific purpose. He had to set out into motion the crucifixion. Sometimes even our own leadership, because we don't have the mind of Christ, we pick somebody, we flaw our picking because we're not the best at picking everybody. But Jesus even says there can be good that comes from the wrong person doing that if the church is strengthened. Now, if it's not, then that's an issue and it needs to be corrected. Sometimes a problem brings a church closer together. And I would think from what we read with the apostles, that's what happened when Judas left. They clung to each other more closely in the way that they approached everything. And I love the leadership application that's shown here with Jesus.
Yeah, so I like what you said there. I think that there's a lot of leadership aspect of this. But I think you also kind of, alluded to something else, with the fact that, when it comes to elders, when you look at elders in the church, we go to them. What is the background of a lot of elders these days? Well, business.
Yep.
Now, that
or military.
Yeah, that doesn't. But I think about that and I go, when we look at leadership, we look for people who've been successful. That doesn't mean that you need to be a businessman in order to be successful.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a kind of an interesting thing when you look at these men is that they don't all come from the same background.
Yeah.
They are all over the place. I mean, you've got tax collector, you got some fishermen, you got a zealot likely here, like the assassination kind of zealot, and you're like, you've got people from different backgrounds and they all choose to follow the Lord. They are chosen and then they choose to follow the Lord. And it's just like, and again, for us, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to just being a Christian, we come from all different kind of backgrounds. And, and then also in our minds, we don't need to get like kind of set in a thought and go, well, is he a businessman?
Right.
Do we know that he's, we need to go, hey, you know what, this guy's a great farmer, but he's also been a great leader of his family. I mean, that's the whole principle for elders and leaders in the church.
Well, I think there's a stark difference, too, in the way that this Jesus chooses these from among the disciples that tells us something about how denominational leadership has typically been done, where so many are sent to lead this area, to lead this particular church or to lead this region or something like that, thinking specifically of the Catholics. And so when you start looking at that compared to the Lord's church and how the Lord has set up his organization in that, in this way versus the way the world sees it, I think this is the start, setting up the kingdom, setting up the authority, but also setting up that organizational pattern for us to follow.
Yeah, one more thing on this, and then we'll have to move on to questions 2 and 3. This is an accurate representation of what Christ wants the church to be like. People from different backgrounds, of different walks of life, having one common thread, and that is Christ. Yes, we all have common threads in certain areas. We both love football probably more than you do at this point. I know you love it, but we're obsessed with it.
No doubt.
But we all have a common thread, even though we have differences and uniques and likes. You love the mountains. You could not pay me to live in the mountains for a week. But that's the thing. What unites us? It's not our common, desires as far as hobbies. It's not our common desires as far as goals from a physical standpoint. It is Christ. And that is the great uniter. And that's something that's another, just a quick text takeaway from this that I can't help but throw out as we now move to question 2. It's great to be the host. I can just say we're done and we have to move on. If you have other stuff, we'll email it out later. No, subscribe to our email list. What made the apostles unique compared to other disciples? I mean, we talked about this with Luke 6. He took all of them together and then from them chose the 12. So why was that the case?
Well, I think their experience, their backgrounds, their walk, just like Matt mentioned a moment ago, the idea that they all come from different backgrounds. You have a tax collector, you have fishermen, you have some, you have a zealot in the mix there too, and of course later you'll have a doctor of the law, you'll have Paul in the mix as well. But I think that their different background uniquely gave them experiences and the character building part of life to help them get to that point. And I think it's interesting, John 15:16, Jesus says, of course, he's getting, at that point, he's getting ready to go out into the garden and be arrested and so forth. He says, "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, that your fruit should remain, and that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you." But it's interesting because he makes that, you did not choose me, but I chose you. Again, there was something in these individuals that he saw that he could use that would benefit the kingdom in this start and be able to help mold them into the leaders of the church, if you will, and those who would open the door, so to speak. So I think that's important to think about, and the fact that he chose them. I like in word pictures of the New Testament, in that commentary, it says this: these 12 apostles stand apart from all others, and that they were chosen once by Jesus himself, that they might be with him. Mark 3 verse 14 says, to be trained to interpret his message and to take that message into the world. And so I think that their unique, their backgrounds, their experiences, the same as with us as well. There's differences about us that bring to the kingdom a special benefit to be able to teach others. We might be able to reach someone that, I might be able to reach someone that Matt's not even in touch with, or has no way to be in touch with, essentially, and so forth. So I think that's what we find in this is the church is diverse in background, experience, leadership capabilities even.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to see the church in that way.
Yeah, you stop and think about these men that were chosen and what makes them unique and what makes them special. It wasn't that they were somehow better men in the sense of all of them were able to still be disciples. Christ didn't deny that these all are disciples, but I think we sometimes will say that we know of some men that they're suited for that role. How many times have we heard somebody say, he is like the epitome of an elder? That's exactly what God wanted when he said elders were going to be created. Or he is the best type of deacon and the mentality that we're supposed to have. I think that's the picture being painted here, is not better men, more equipped for service in the way that Jesus needed them to be. And we're going to talk in the third question about what that service was going to largely entail with their mission and the influence it has on the church today. But think about just this one last piece. What would life be like for us if we could pick with that type of accuracy? Jesus needed people who could help get the church established and started on the day of Pentecost. He picked the right men to do that. Jesus needed to pick somebody that would ensure that he was crucified. He picked the right man to do that. He did exactly what the Father's will was and putting it into practice and plan. And we'll actually be back together to talk about Judas more in depth in episode 7 this season. But chosen with a purpose. Just like every time we talk about the Scattered Abroad Network, when we pick a new person that we want to approach and say, hey, will you come and podcast with us, or will you come and work with us, there's a purpose behind it. Now, we're not Jesus by any means, but we're trying to do the same type of choosing with a purpose of what will be able to be fulfilled and help the kingdom better by adding this individual to our fold and to our repertoire of talent that we have, or podcasting, whatever you want to say. That's the same mission, I believe, that made them unique, is that Jesus says, who can I pick that will uniquely accomplish what I need accomplished?
Yeah, I think that when you look at the different personalities here, and going back to Wayne's point, I think you can take that even a step further, that, one person might be more effective in reaching somebody, even if we both know the person.
Sure.
Yeah, and so, you
or
may be more...
Or it may take us both.
Yeah. And so... you may be more effective than I am at something or with somebody, sure. And that's good. We need that. And there's a lot of different personalities here. And then, I mean, you can go, and I think this is an interesting study. If you go and you look at how old the apostles probably were, they're young men. I mean, they are young. I mean, we're talking as they're following Jesus, likely even teenagers except for Peter. And, these are young men. And then I love how in all of this, John is probably the youngest here. I think he is the youngest. And then, Peter is the oldest.
Probably, yeah.
And who gets paired together? Peter and John, they go out and they're working together. And just think about some of these personalities. Like if you've got Peter, and he's already pretty bold. But then when he denies the Lord, it's almost like a switch is just flipped. And when you see the resurrection happen, and of course, you go into the later parts of John where he says, feed my sheep. And you see that he is ashamed of what he's done. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, I'm never doing that again.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then, he stands up before all those people on the day of Pentecost. You don't really have Acts chapter 2 without Peter.
Sure.
Right. And then, what is Peter doing from then on out? Oh, you know what? We're going to take you before the Sanhedrin. Oh, okay. Yeah. Hey, what? We're gonna still preach Jesus. I don't care. And so he does that. But see, again, Jesus has picked a specific person that is going to do good based on all of his experiences, and they all are going to their death, save John. Yeah. And, that you've got all these people that are just from different backgrounds with different personalities. And we don't really think about that, very much. But, I mean, just think back when you were in preaching school. I can remember when we were in preaching school. And I will say that there are some disagreements that happen among students.
No way.
Yeah. And you can get into heated debates and heated arguments and then we've even been on campaigns and it's hot and we're door knocking and we're just tired and
cranky.
Sweaty and hungry and cranky and all that stuff. And then, we can get into little spats. And here you've got 12 men following Jesus, and they likely had those same things going on.
Right.
And they're learning from these experiences, and they're learning from the Lord. And then we have what we have today because of all the work that they did. And, of course, that all comes from Jesus having chosen them.
Is that why John wrote that he outran Peter because he was younger?
He was
clearly, man.
I can't help but point it out, right?
Yeah. 1 Corinthians 1, Paul makes this statement. I think this kind of epitomizes the diverse backgrounds of the apostles. Thinking about this, it says, "For you see your calling, brethren, that not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called, but God has chosen the foolish things of this world to put to shame the wise. God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things which are mighty and the base things and so forth." So that point is very clear. Here is the way that God has chosen to use men who may have been rejected in the past for something, or men whose personality a little rough around the edges. The Sons of Thunder, man, they're ready for a fight. Let's get it, And you got all these different backgrounds and different personalities that are coming out in the work. but they're going to be so useful in the start of the kingdom. But isn't that what we even see today in the church? You know, it takes a bunch of different kinds, if you will, to get it done.
Yeah. Well, and you look at the final question that we have for today, about 3 minutes-ish left before we'll have to start doing the outro with everything we've got to talk about. But how does the apostolic mission still influence the church today? What about that continues their influence? How did that happen? How does it continue? What do we see there?
I can't help but think about Matthew 28 and the Great Commission. And, they have been chosen by Jesus, and then they are to go out and do the same things that Jesus did. Go out and teach all nations. So he taught them, and now they go and teach all nations. Well, what does that do? Now, I'm going to have to throw this out because sometimes I run across preachers that teach this, and this is error, okay? I'm just going to tell you straight up, you got a preacher teaching this is error. But sometimes people will say, oh, the Great Commission is only for his apostles, his disciples there. That was it. It was just for them. No, the point is it says, that to go out into all the world, teach the gospel, right? But then, people leave out verse 20, which says, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I've commanded you. And he just got through giving them the Great Commission. Go and teach all nations. That is the biggest influence that we have from them today, because they did that. They reached the entire world, and then now we are doing that today.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so one thing you just said there that's interesting. Easiest verse that I can think of off the top of my head that disproves what you're saying about that's error. That's wrong. 1 Corinthians 11:1. Imitate me as I imitate Christ. What did Christ tell them to do? Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Paul would no doubt have been given the same charge as he was under the tutelage, what he talks about in his epistles. It's the same thing.
Right.
Same mentality. Wayne, what do you have before we close out?
Acts 1:2, it says, until the day which he was taken up after he, through the Holy Spirit, had given commandments to the apostles whom he had chosen. So there's a connection there. Whom he had chosen, he gave those commandments to them, showing that lineage of authority, if you will. Here's a line of authority being handed down and passed down to them. And so there's this line of authority. And you could go back, Luke 24, John 14, 15, 16, where he's with them and he's telling them what he's doing. He's going to lead the Holy Spirit. He's going to give them those commandments, and they're going to go out and they're going to do what? And then you have 1 John 1, verses 1 to 3, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, looked upon, our hands have handled, concerning the word of life. That life was manifested, we have seen, we bear witness, and we declare unto you eternal life, which was with the Father. And so their witness, their authority was the big, Jesus was using that, beginning the kingdom, beginning the church. And so I think their influence now, obviously we follow the apostles' doctrine, right? We talk about that often, but that's that lineage of authority that's connected to those whom he chose.
It's good stuff. I really appreciate you guys being with me today. Thankful for the opportunity. And so here's how we really want to end this. With the application for us today, are we responding to God's desire for us? That's what these apostles had to do. They could have been chosen and they said, I don't really think that's for me. They had to accept that calling and say, yes, I'm ready. Now, we're not going to be called the same way they were called today. We know that. The Scriptures teach something differently for us than it taught for them because of the timing of everything in the miraculous age being over. But Christ not speaking today doesn't mean he doesn't call us through the Word of God. Romans 10, 13 through 17 says we need men who will preach the Word of God. While you won't be called an apostle and have the miraculous abilities and all of that, we need you. God needs you. How will they hear without you? Think of all of the impact that we think about. Ephesians 2 and verse 20, the apostles built the church on the foundation of that teaching, with the chief cornerstone being Christ, and also the foundation of the prophets. Who will help continue to build upon the foundation that's been laid and the chief cornerstone? We need you. And I know of a school that can help you. The Memphis School of Preaching is one that we're privileged to be a work of that great school. We were all trained by that great school. We hope and pray that you'll make a point in your life, if you're interested in preaching the gospel, to consider MSOP. Thank you for being with us today. We want to give a couple of house notes, if you will, as we kind of close this episode out. We are a work of the Scattered Abroad Network, which is overseen by the Memphis School of Preaching. Our mission is to take the gospel to every ear, every soul, everywhere. You can find us on all major platforms, or if you have an Apple iPhone, you can download our app. We're working on Android. And remember, those who were scattered abroad went everywhere preaching the word. So let's keep scattering the word together.